finishing off a sermon series today titled Going Places. We've been going at it for 3 weeks, and if you missed the first two, those are online. You can find those on our website. The place that we're trying to go is captured by the Apostle Paul when he says this. He says, I have learned the secret of living in every situation. Doesn't that sound like a good place to go to? Wouldn't you like to be there? Wouldn't you like to know how to live when you have no money in the bank? And know how to live when there's a lot of money in the bank? Wouldn't you like to know how to live when you have plenty of good health and energy, and especially know how to live in those times when energy is low, when morale is low? Wouldn't you like to know how to live when you got lots of good friends around you? And wouldn't you like to know how to live when you're feeling all alone? I mean, if there's a secret to living in every situation, wouldn't you like to know? And if this is a destination that you could get to, wouldn't you like to go there? Well, you turn to your neighbor. I know we don't do this much. Just say, I want to go there. Say that to someone. Yeah. Don't you want to go there? I mean, I want to go there. I want to lead you there. I want to lead myself there. I want you all to help me get there. This sounds like a pretty good place. I want to know this secret. And the good news is that this secret is not really a secret. For Paul says, I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. What Paul is saying is that I have this relationship with Jesus Christ, which means that I have learned to see the world like Jesus sees it. And I've learned to do in the world like Jesus did, and I learned to trust God like Jesus trusted God. And something about this relationship, learning to see, do, and trust like Jesus did, it has given me strength. And no matter what situation comes my way, I know what to do. Isn't that a wonderful destination? It is for this reason that this is so appealing that our church, and pretty much every church, I think, should have a mission statement that looks something like this. The words don't have to be the same, but the idea. Lead people to a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. I want to lead people. You're people. I'm people. There's people we haven't even met yet who need Jesus in their life because they're facing situations that they don't know what to do. Because as we just heard, life is hard. There's a lot of frightening things. So we want to lead some people to a growing relationship with Jesus Christ so they know what to do no matter what the situation, so they have that strength. Now, I've gotten some feedback on this sermon series so far, and I'm so grateful to hear that for some people this is really helpful. And to be honest, it's actually been kind of helping me. You've heard about preaching to the choir, right? I've been kind of preaching to the preacher. And thinking about the fact that my relationship with Jesus Christ can grow and that this can be helpful, and there's things that I can do about that that will help me get along the way, has been really nice. And I've been feeling pretty good. My life has been looking pretty good. I've been happy. Then I made a mistake. I started listening to and reading the news again. Now, I'm all for being informed, and I read the news on a regular basis, but, I started reading kind of the sensational news. I read about the Zika virus and how it's, said to be down in Florida now, and that's frightening. And I read about, how could you miss all the shootings that have been happening, people getting shot by cops and people shooting cops and just all the violence that's going on. Read about Europe and the things happening there and the terrorist attacks. It makes me, I'm worried. It makes me worried that we might have them here. I'm worried about a lot of things, it turns out. The more I read the news, the more I find to be worried about. I don't know if you've done this yet, but we have this presidential election going on. It worries me. I tend to believe that, organizations and countries and almost everything, if they have a strong leader, that it will go well, and if there's a bad leader, it won't go very well. And, if you listen to both sides of the debate, it's unclear whether we have a good leader. And this is scary. And it makes me worried about the economy right now, and it makes me worried about the kind of world that my little girl is going to grow up in. There's a lot of things to worry about. Anybody out there worried? Do you worry sometimes? Yeah. Well, we all do. And, since we're looking at what Jesus would do, how Jesus would look at it, I thought maybe we ought to look at how Jesus thinks about worry. So there's a lot that we could talk about. Jesus addresses worry quite a bit. But one of the places he addresses it is in the Gospel of Matthew. And so let's look at what he says. He says, therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life. Well, thanks, Jesus. That's really helpful. He says, therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, about your body, or what you will wear. Okay? All right. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Well, yeah, I guess so. He's going to give us an example. He says, look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Okay, so I think I'm starting to understand. Okay, we worry about things that are relatively small in comparison to the God that we have. And if you look around at the way God treats his creation, he takes care of it. I mean, look at the birds. He feeds them. And Jesus is going to ask us a question. I think that you're going to say yes. He says, are you not more valuable than they? Aren't you more valuable than the birds? Yeah, I'm starting to feel maybe a little bit better. And then Jesus asks a question that digs right into one of the first insights that I want to share with you about worry, about what Jesus says about worry. He says this. He asks a question. Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? Anybody ever done that here? Anybody ever added a single hour of your life by worrying? The answer is no, of course not. Because worry is always a subtraction. One of the first things to realize about worry is it always subtracts. It always takes away. We're going to come back to that idea in a minute. Jesus says, why do you worry about your clothes? Well, I'm not that worried about my clothes, but I'm with you, Jesus. What else you have to say? He says, see how the flowers of the field grow? They do not labor or spin, yet not even Solomon in all of his glory was dressed like one of these flowers. I want to park it here for a moment. Because Jesus reveals a couple more insights about worry that are just so valuable for us. The first one is that worry is about labor. Worry takes energy. It takes time. And it subtracts energy. It subtracts time. You only have so much energy, and I only have so much energy. And if we spend 10%, 20%, 30% of our time on worry, then we only have what's left to do something about the problem, to make an impact on our lives. So we're always subtracting. It's always labor. And then worry is also like spinning. And I've asked Mason to come on up here to give us an example of what it looks like to worry. Now, you all have probably played this game before, and I'll be here to make sure she's okay, but she is going to show us what worrying looks like. Would you show us what worrying looks like? A little worried she might fall off. Okay, all right. So, you've done that before, right? It might have been a while. Can I get a round of applause for me? That is what worry looks like. You're going nowhere, right? You're not adding anything to your life, and you're going nowhere. You're spending time on something that doesn't make a difference. And if Mesa was to continue to do that, you know what would have happened? She would have fallen over. She would have gotten sick. Ever been sick with worry? Jesus goes on with this example about looking at the flowers of the field. He says, if that is how God clothes the grass of the field, the flowers of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown in the fire, will he not much more clothe you? Won't he take care of you? Because those are unimportant things. Those are kind of temporary things. And you are very, very important. And God's going to take care of you. Look at these two examples, the birds and the grass. And he's taking care of them. He will take care of you. And then Jesus adds this little barb on the end of it. He kind of sticks it to us. And Jesus never does that because he wants to hurt us. He wants to teach us something important. He says, you of little faith. You're worrying about these things. And you can look around and see that God will take care of you. You of little faith. What Jesus is trying to teach us is that faith and worry are connected. When you have little faith, you have big worry. And when you get big faith, you'll have little worry. Worry is a faith issue. It's a faith issue. It's always a subtraction. It's like spinning. It takes labor. It's a faith issue. If you want to worry less, you need to grow your faith bigger. Jesus finishes the teaching. He says, therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. What's he trying to tell us? He's saying we spend time worrying about tomorrow when we really can't do anything about tomorrow because tomorrow's tomorrow. It's not today. But today, there's things you can do. There's stuff for you to handle. There's problems you need to take care of. There's people you need to call on, people you need to talk to. Today has enough of its own. Stop thinking about and worrying about tomorrow, which you can't change because it's tomorrow. Now, Jesus is not saying don't plan. He teaches about that elsewhere, so don't be mistaken. But the worry part, where we worry about tomorrow, is something we can't change. Here's a concept that's in your bulletin and that, for me, has just been so helpful. When you think about your life and all the factors in it, all the things that determine, and I mean all of it. I mean from the country you're born in, the race that you're born as, the gender you're born as, the parents you had, what's going on in the political scene, natural disasters, all these things that have impacted who you are and that can change your life. It's quite a lot of things. It's about 90% of your life, give or take. And when you think about the things you actually can control, it's relatively small when you really think about the big picture. And so the numbers really don't matter, but what I want to show you here is that it's small. This 10%, that's you. That's what you can control. And the 90% is what you can't. And here's what I've observed about myself. And here's definitely what I've observed about other people. Is you know what we focus on? The 90%. We spend our time thinking about the things that we can't control. What other people did, what other people are going to think, all this stuff that we can't control. We spend all of our energy spinning around on that, and we never take care of the 10%. We leave the 10% out of the picture. And Jesus is trying to teach us that 10%, that's what you've been entrusted with. That's what you can change. You can do something about that today. It might feel like a small step in the scheme of things, but don't neglect to make that small step. Take care of that which God has entrusted you to care for. And then that 90%, that's God's. That's God's. How they're going to react, what's going to happen, on the things outside of your control, that is God's territory. Trust God with that and focus on what you can do something about. This is faith. This is faith. Do what you can do. Take care of your 10%. And then trust God with the 90%. And it's different than how a lot of us act, and I'm guilty of it too. Now there's a great story, and I can look at a ton of stories because Jesus teaches on faith over and over again. But there's a famous story, it's the parable of the three servants, or the parable of the 3 talents, however you want to say it. It's in Matthew 25. And it's a story about a couple faithful people and one that is not. And the story starts off, there's this rich master, this rich guy, and he's going on a journey, and so he entrusts his wealth with these 3 servants that he has. And the first servant, he brings him up, and he gives him 5 bags of gold. We'll call him the 5-bagger. And he says, I'm going to give you these 5 bags of gold. And he brings up the second person and says, I'm going to give you 2 bags of gold. And the third person, he says, I'm going to give you 1 bag of gold. And he entrusts his wealth with them, each according to their ability. Now, some of you might be thinking, that doesn't sound very Christian because it's not fair. But this is a story that Jesus made up. And also, we all know that life is not fair. And in fact, if you were the rich master, you would give the gold out according to the person's ability as well, because that's kind of how life works. You can handle this, you can handle that, and you're not as mature or developed, so you're going to get this. So the master goes off for quite some time. And while he's off, the one with the 5 bags, the 5-bagger, he goes out immediately and he invests the money and he doubles it. Now he's got 10 bags. And the guy, the servant with the 2 bags, he goes out immediately and then he doubles that money as well. Now he's got 4 bags. But the 1-bagger, the last servant, he goes out and he digs a hole and he hides the money. Sometime later, the master comes back. And he wants to settle accounts. He wants to know, what have you done with my money? And so the first one to come up is the 5-bagger, the guy that has doubled the money to 10, because he's excited. Wouldn't you be as well? You just doubled your master's money. He says, Master, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. Hey, check it out. Look at what I've done with the money you entrusted to me. And the master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. This is how life works quite often, doesn't it? You've been faithful with a few things. Now you get to be in charge of a lot of things. Anybody that's ever climbed the career ladder knows that when you're faithful with the job that you have, then often you will get selected to take on more responsibility. I will put you in charge of many things. Come share your master's happiness. Jesus is trying to tell us that when we're faithful with a few things, not only will we get responsibility for more things, but we will share in the happiness. The servant with 2 bags of gold also came to the master. The servant said, you entrusted me with 2 bags, and I have gained 2 more. Now say it with me. The master replied, what? Well done, good and faithful servant. Boy, I would like to hear that. Somebody say that to me, wouldn't you? Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come, share in your master's happiness. Now, y'all know what's coming next? This is where the soundtrack would change, wouldn't it? Right? The one who had received 1 bag of gold came, Master, I knew you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid of you and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here's what belongs to you. I didn't want it in the first place. You notice the difference? You see the difference between these 3 people? The one who was unfaithful, what did he do? He went straight to the blame game. Before we talk about me and what I did with what you entrusted me, let's talk about you. You were a hard man. You're not good with money. I was afraid of you. You, and I didn't want this. You didn't even really give me enough to invest in the first place. I didn't even want it. Here's your money back. How do you think the master replied? Not very kind. He says something along the lines, oh, so you knew this about me. Well, at least you could have taken it to the bank and I would have gotten interest on it. And then he says, so take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. Which again, for some of us, that doesn't sound very Christian. But this is how life works. Give it to the one who has 10 bags, for whoever has will be given more. And they will have abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, this doesn't sound like a very good way to end a sermon, so you're in luck. I'm not going to end it here. Weeping and gnashing of teeth. What is happening? He hasn't been banished to hell. This is just a story about a guy with money that entrusted it to some servants. But he has been put out of the inner circle. Look, you had an opportunity, is what he's saying, to do something with what I gave you. And you failed to do anything at all. You let fear and whatever else, laziness, whatever else it might be, stop you from doing something with what you've been entrusted. And so now, I'm putting you outside of the circle. And there'll be weeping because you've lost an opportunity. When we lose something, we're sad and we weep. And there'll be gnashing of teeth, which is frustration. Have you ever been like, I can't believe I missed that opportunity? That's what it's going to feel like if you're not a faithful servant with what God has entrusted you with. You got 10%. Maybe 11, maybe 12. The number really doesn't matter. You get the concept. There's an allotment of time, an opportunity. You got a certain measure of time, a certain measure of energy, a certain measure of skills, and it's different than everybody else. You might be a 5-bagger, you might be a 2-bagger, or a 1-bagger, but you've been given something. God has entrusted you with something. And when you put it into play, when you invest it, when you do something about it, there's happiness. And God gives you more responsibility. God multiplies what you do with what you've been entrusted with. And that works on a relational level, that works at work, and that works at a church. Let me talk a little bit about the dynamic here at church. I know this is kind of small, but so there's 10% that we can do as a church, and there's 90% that we need to just trust God with. So one example, we as individuals, we can invest in people outside the church, and we can invite them to church. We can do that. That's always available to us. Having new people come, show up, become members, become part of our community, that's up to God. We can't control it. We can invest and invite, but we can't control what happens. That's God's. We can focus on doing really good hospitality, on wearing our name tags, on saying our names, on trying to remember names, greeting people, all the things that involve that. We can focus on that, but that warm experience that we're hoping everybody has, that's not for us to control. That's God's. That's theirs. That's outside of our control. We can staff a nursery. We can set up a nursery for babies that we don't even have yet, although we do have a couple within our community. In fact, I know a family right now that's interested in visiting our church, but when I told them we don't have a nursery just yet, I saw their faces change. They haven't visited yet. We can staff a nursery with the babies and the young parents that come along with that, which every church needs, which we would love to have, because we are looking for all sorts of people to be here. That is up to God. We could have a youth mission trip, which I've begun to talk about with certain people. But the growth of the youth, both in terms of the amount of youth that are involved in our church and their individual spiritual growth, which is what we're really interested in, that is up to God. I could go on. There's all sorts of things, but you get the idea. There's things that we can do, and if we're faithful in those things, God will take care of the 90%. And He, through that story that Jesus told, is promising us that there will be more responsibility, more opportunity, and happiness. But are we taking care of our 10%? After church today, here in this space, after you take a bathroom break and coffee, if you want to get involved and do whatever you can do, whatever measure you've been given, you might have just a tiny bit of time. You might have a lot of time. You might have a capacity for certain things and not other things. But if you want to get involved, I'm going to talk about the things we're looking for right now so that our Sunday morning experience is compelling, so that when somebody new who needs Christ or needs a community walks through our doors, that they have a great experience. So we get the opportunity so that we're entrusted with the chance to love them and get to know them and be loved by them. So this is all about growing our faithfulness. Growing our faithfulness as a church. Growing our faithfulness as individuals. And you do that by doing what you can and then trusting. Don't spin around worrying about that 90% you can't do anything about. Do something. Take a step. God will bless that. And then you know what? At some point, either somebody's going to say it to you, or in your prayer life, you're going to hear it. You're going to hear, "Well done, good, faithful servant." I get the tingles just thinking about it. And I want that for you. I do. If you allow me to pray for you. Let's pray. Well done, good and faithful servant. Lord, we want to hear these words. God, for those who have been faithful servants, and there are many, many here, let them hear that. But God, let us continue to do that which you put in front of us. Those opportunities to invite people, to invest in people, to love people, to forgive people, to work on ourselves, to grow our relationship towards you, to have a prayer life, to get into the Word. God, let us do those things. And then all the things we're worried about, Lord, all the things that we spin around, the things that we spend our time on, let us just give it to you, Lord, for you have said it's yours anyways. So the space can be cleared so we can have peace. God, I pray that for each person here, that they might grow in their relationship with your Son, Jesus Christ. For that is the secret to